All right, guys. Wednesday, November 5th, 7:41 p.m. And we are sitting here. It seemed like we reached a boiling point with James Franklin on Monday night at Virginia Tech. And time keeps going along. And I just wanted to weigh in on a couple of things, give my thoughts, and also provide facts, provide fiction, provide predictions, and also provide some lessons. And I'll answer some letters from the lunch pail. Before we get started, first of all, I am rocking my Park City sweatshirt. It's almost ski season. Cannot wait. There is nothing better than ski season. There is no activity better than skiing. If you do not do it, you should partake in it. It is awesome. Second of all, back day today. Felt great. Deadlifts, rows. Had some farmers carry today. It was an awesome, awesome day. We also got Frankie in the background enjoying himself. So let's start with fact number one. James Franklin and Virginia Tech have mutual interest. That is a fact. A lot of people are mad at Mike McDaniel. A lot of people are mad at basically a lot of folks for perpetrating and talking about this entire courtship. So I just want to lay that out there as a fact. Here is something that is fiction. If James Franklin doesn't decide by X day, that means that it's definitely not happening. Obviously, there's information out there and has been talked about these deadlines. Was it Sunday? Was it Monday? Did it exist in the first place or the second place? We don't know. People may say to know, but there's no way of definitively knowing what the situation is. That will be between Jimmy Sexton, the search committee, and James Franklin. However, to say that something is dead because we reach a certain day makes zero sense. I'm going to get into the why, and the reason why is because of this fact. Virginia Tech holds zero leverage. There's no reason for James Franklin to sign today. There's no reason for James Franklin to sign yesterday. There's no reason for James Franklin to sign a week ago. Ultimately, the situation is the jobs that are available are the jobs that are available, and we'll talk about them and kind of where they stack rank against Virginia Tech. But like James Franklin, to me, is the slam dunk number one option, would be the best case scenario. Now, why is that? The way that I look at it is, David Teal said this on Tech Sideline today, James Franklin would be, Bill Belichick aside, probably the most well-credentialed, well-respected, most accomplished coach to sign in the ACC maybe in my lifetime. You think about some of the great coaches in the ACC, like Dabo Swinney. Dabo Swinney made his name in the ACC. Frank Beamer, he made his name in the ACC. This would be an unbelievable get, not just for Virginia Tech, but for the ACC in general. So there's that side of it, right? So if there was some deadline on Sunday, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, whatever day it was, you can say that and you can start to entertain other options. But ultimately, if James Franklin wants the job and comes to you and says he wants the job, you're not going to slam the door in his face and say, never mind. That would be crazy. So that's the situation Virginia Tech is in. Now, the thing that Virginia Tech benefits from is the sooner that James Franklin signs anywhere is the sooner that he gets a jump start to put together the roster. When Justin Fuente took the job at Virginia Tech after Frank Beamer, he spent a lot of time with the current coaching staff to understand, hey, like, tell me about the team. Tell me about the guys on each position. Who are guys that are probably going to factor in next year? What are positions that we need to recruit past? What are the character of some of the young men on this team? Tell me a little bit about the staff. Observe the staff. See who you want to keep. So James Franklin, when he went on College Game Day, his goal is to win a national championship, compete for a national championship, and put out the best program that he can. And he's a competitor, so I would believe that he's going to do everything he can to stick it to Penn State, stick it to the college football community, and be as successful as he can. With every passing day is a day that is thrown away where he would get a head start on making that happen. So that is one thing that I'm sure James Franklin is aware of. The one thing that is a little confusing, and again, this is not inside information, this is just how Jimmy Sexton works. Jimmy Sexton, I don't know if he has like this magic potion or if he has like this elixir that he feeds all of his coaches, but he's in a position. And if you don't know who Jimmy Sexton is, he's James Franklin's agent. He's also the agent of countless other coaches. Lane Kiffin, like you can Google, he represents a huge portion of the college football community. He's in a position where he can almost leverage one guy to help two or three of his other guys. And in a coaching carousel like this one, that's kind of what you have to deal with. So not only are you trying to communicate with James Franklin, you're also trying to communicate with Jimmy Sexton. And Jimmy Sexton is not only looking out for James Franklin, but he's looking out for every single one of his clients. Now, regardless of what job James Franklin wants, he's going to be ultimately the one that if he wants the job, he will step forward and take it. I do not fault him for entertaining and waiting because he has the ability to do so. And God knows what's going to happen with the rest of this, year. So that leads me to my next fiction here. And the next fiction is James Franklin taking too long signifies his ego is massive and believes VT is below him. Back to Jimmy Sexton. Jimmy Sexton is in a position where he is going to make a lot of money this fall and this winter with all of these coaches that he is going to place in new jobs. If James Franklin is the one that jumps on this new job, he is essentially setting the market for the rest of college football when it comes to this coaching hire. Now, yes, Curt Cignetti's new contract plays a hand in that. I forget who just signed a 2-year extension. Matt Rule just signed a 2-year extension over at Nebraska. So you have to think about it. This is an opportunity for Jimmy Sexton and I believe it's called the American College Football Coaches Association, AFCA or something like that. They're all going to want to see James Franklin land in a pretty fortuitous situation. So I would say factor that in. This is not as simple as, well, James Franklin, if he wants the job, he should just take the job. If he doesn't want the job, then he doesn't love Virginia Tech. That's certainly not the case. Now, the other factor that you have to look at is why is he slow playing this? The other jobs that may open are the ones that interest me the most, because I truly think Virginia Tech is in a really interesting situation where they are the best current opportunity for James Franklin. Arkansas fans may disagree with me on that. I will address that in a second. But you can come in here into the ACC with this new budget and be immediately successful. So why wait? Well, the reason why you wait is because these are some schools that could open up. Some are likely, some are unlikely. Florida State, I think that one's pretty likely. They did Mike Norvell did himself a great service by beating the hell out of Wake Forest. I was pretty surprised to see that, but that's a job that could still open. My thoughts on that, though, are if it would have opened, or if it was going to open, it would have already opened. They're in an awful financial situation. Also, you guys are clowns. Like the amount of pounding sand that they did over the ACC and how bad this conference is. Well, you guys can't even win conference games. So Florida State can they can piss on a laundry line, piss in a fan. Excuse me. That's what I was looking for. Clemson. I'm not going to say that Dabo Swinney is going to get fired, because I certainly think that would be a ridiculous move for Clemson to make. But I could definitely see a mutual parting of ways. I got to tell you, watching Dabo Swinney these last couple of weeks has been, and I like Dabo Swinney a lot. I'm a Dabo Swinney supporter, but it very much seems like we're watching like Michael Jackson holding the baby over the apartment complex gate. It looks like we're watching Britney Spears shave her head. Like, I agree with what he said about officiating, but he has been crashing out on a level that we have not seen in a long time. South Carolina, they just fired their offensive coordinator. Will they make a change at the head coaching position? That one also affects Virginia Tech. Here are some other interesting ones. TCU, will we see the head coach at TCU take another job? Washington, will we see Jed Fish take another job? And then these two are a little less likely, Notre Dame and Oregon. So those are the jobs that I would be waiting for, because all of those jobs are extremely interesting. I would put Florida State and Clemson probably at the top of that list. And then TCU and Washington make less sense because of their destination. Notre Dame makes a good bit of sense if Coach Freeman goes somewhere else, and Oregon's an amazing job. I don't even know if they would consider Franklin given who would be leaving the job and also the geographical situation there. South Carolina is very similar to Arkansas. I just don't know how successful you can be at a South Carolina. And then the last one would be waiting to see if Florida or LSU reach out if they miss out on a couple of guys that they're looking for. I do not think that James Franklin will be in the running for the LSU job at all. I do think a lot of things need to go wrong for Florida to consider James Franklin. So that's where I stand on that. We're moving into a next section called things that are not confirmed facts, but we will play them out. Entertaining PJ Fleck. PJ Fleck is a name that has been floated around as being connected somewhat to Virginia Tech. And everything that I'm saying is public. It's on Twitter. And again, it's not fact. It's just something that's out there and I'm playing it out. PJ Fleck, number one, I think the immediate reaction is like, oh, we don't need to hire PJ Fleck. First of all, PJ Fleck is a damn ball coach. I have no problems with PJ Fleck. I think he's done a tremendous job at Minnesota. I think he did a tremendous job at his previous stop. It was directional Michigan. I forget which one that it was, but he's done a really, really, really good job. And I think he's a damn good ball coach. With that said, PJ Fleck is represented by Brian Harlan. Brian Harlan is not Jimmy Sexton. So if you're pursuing or really pursuing PJ Fleck, there's no kind of, master of the puppets who's able to know what that conversation looks like or doesn't look like. So I think that's an interesting move. Some other names that have been tied, we've obviously talked about Shane Beamer ad nauseum. You can check out that video I did on Shane Beamer and his candidacy at Virginia Tech. Manny Diaz doing a good job at Duke. I personally would welcome a Manny Diaz hire. I think he would do a good job. And let me just say this, if it's anybody but James Franklin, James Franklin is my number one choice. I've been pretty clear about that. I think it's the best case scenario for Virginia Tech, not only because of his coaching ability, but also what he would do from a donor perspective. I think the type of commitment, a lot of people will say, well, if we don't get James Franklin, we better get the same support that we get if we get Bob Chesney or if we get Manny Diaz or if we get PJ Fleck. You're not going to get that. You're just not. That would be like saying, well, we're Apple and we're thinking about releasing the iPhone, but if we don't release the iPhone, our stock better still go up. No, there's going to be a huge, tremendous swell of excitement if this is James Franklin. And I think that unlocks some things that other coaches will not be able to unlock. So keep that in mind. A couple of other rumors that have been spiraling around. People are calling and yelling at each other on the phone. I saw this from Joe Rogers. True or not? Come on, guys. I had a client yell at me on the phone the other day. Pat and I have yelled at each other on the phone. Again, this is a really heated situation. Again, I don't know if this is a thing that happened, but I don't think that that's completely abnormal. These are probably not very much like board of visitors meetings where you get on a Zoom and you're talking to each other and asking each other how your Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday is. Jimmy Sexton is a bully and Virginia Tech needs a coach and wants a coach in short order. So if that's true, it doesn't really mean anything to me. And if somebody gets their feelies hurt because they got yelled at on a phone call, it's probably not somebody that I want to be working with. And again, the rumor is that it was Jimmy Sexton and somebody else who was yelling at each other. So who knows if that's true? Again, all this information would be coming from people who have signed NDAs. So riddle me a little bit dubious of this stuff being true. The other one is we actually have heard this with a lot of coaches as they go through coaching searches. It's just a little abnormal given that James Franklin is doing this in the middle of a football season. And the rumor is that he may or may not have been calling recruits, or somebody may or may not have been calling recruits. There's this Twitter profile that doesn't have a profile picture of a person and doesn't have a real name associated with it, but he keeps calling all these shots. I think he mentioned this as well. No idea if it's true, but if it is, technically, any coach that does not currently work for a university can call whoever, whenever they want. Current coaches cannot do that. They have to abide by the dead periods and everything else. So again, this is any coach. I would assume that they would be doing that. I assume that coaches, if Lane Kiffin is deciding on taking another job, he may do that. We heard Buzz Williams admit that he did it when he was at Texas A&M, not telling them, hey, I want you to come with me. Will you come with me? Do I have your commitment? But he was basically saying, hey, I'm thinking of doing this. Like, I owe it to you as somebody who committed to me to tell you that I am taking this Maryland job when he was at Texas A&M. And Texas A&M fans were all pissed about it. I would encourage Texas A&M fans to look into literally any other situation that Buzz Williams was actively in, because he did that to us when he went to Texas A&M, and I don't really have a problem with it. So never forget, guys, players commit to coaches 99% of the time. They don't commit to the school. They learn to love the school, but most of the time, especially in basketball, they're committing to the coach. So now we're moving on to what I believe to be factual. These are things that I believe to be true. Of the current openings that James Franklin would be in consideration for, Virginia Tech is absolutely the best option. Why is that? Number one, everybody wants to talk about, well, this school can throw a bunch of money at them. Our Arkansas fans love saying, well, we're going to pay him so much more money. Here's the deal. Curt Cignetti just signed an extension for $11.6 million per year from Indiana. Number one, I think that sets the market for coaches at the top of the game. And James Franklin, newsflash, did just get fired and is not having the success that Curt Cignetti is having in Indiana, and will not be as highly sought after as Curt Cignetti is at Indiana. So I wouldn't want us to go north of that unless it's extremely marginal. If you land on 12 million plus, that is a pretty bold move of any school to make. And I don't know how any school would feel about it. So again, I'm not trying to count people's pockets or limit how much somebody can make, but I think 11.6 or around that venue is, if you're Virginia Tech or if you're Arkansas, if you're Auburn, you may be in a position where you need to overpay a little bit. But going north of that 11.6 number or even above 12 million, I think would be a pretty ballsy move by anybody. And I think some of these other schools are unaware of our new situation with our athletics budget. So, and that's not their fault. They just need to get to know ball more. That is a joke, Arkansas fans. Let's talk about Auburn and Arkansas. I'm going to share my screen here. First of all, I wish I was wearing this shirt today. This is the Frankie Says Relax shirt on Ross from Friends. If James Franklin does, God willing, get this job, I will be wearing this shirt often. But let's talk about Auburn. Their schedule sucks. This is their 2026 schedule. They play at Alabama, at Georgia, at Ole Miss, at Tennessee, Florida, and LSU. So if James Franklin's goal is to win a national title at his next spot, I would assume James Franklin would not like to be on the hot seat again. He has a family, cares a lot about his family. I assume that his daughter, I believe he has a daughter that's a senior in high school. She'll probably be going to school where James Franklin is next, and he would like to remain at that school. Auburn is one of those schools where if you win 9 games, you are inserted onto the hot seat, or 8 games. And then if you win 6 games, you are then ejected from the school. Brian Harsin, weird situation. Gus Malzahn kind of ran its course. Hugh Freeze, I don't think he even really had a chance. Granted, look, I think you guys have made some poor hires. Like, I look back at this Hugh Freeze contract, and it's crazy you guys paid that much money, especially with no offsets. For Hugh Freeze, I don't really know who else you all were bargaining against at that point coming from Liberty. But that's kind of where we are on Auburn. I just look at the schedule and combine that with the fact that you're not ever going to be the best team annually in your own state. I don't think that that is something that James Franklin would be super jazzed about to do. So those are my thoughts on Auburn. Let me know in the comments if you're an Auburn fan and how you would feel about hiring James Franklin in general. Now let's jump over to Arkansas. Before I even touch this schedule, which is also brutal, I'm going to read you a quote from Arkansas's AD that happened just a few weeks ago. In a press conference, he said publicly, football, where we are right now, we're not set up to win a national championship. I'll just be brutally honest with that. But I think we're set up to compete really well in the SEC, especially now with the new revenue sharing model. Am I saying that James Franklin has every resource that he needs to immediately compete for national titles at Virginia Tech? No. Do I believe that James Franklin's path to the college football playoff to then have an opportunity to compete for a national title is the easiest at Virginia Tech? Hell yeah, I do. I think it is absolutely easier regardless of what coach you're talking about. You can talk about Nick Saban coming back into college football, and his easiest path would be in the ACC. And instead of playing LSU, South Carolina, Tennessee, Auburn, Texas, Texas A&M, Utah, I'll just read through this Arkansas schedule really quickly. Some of the hitters that you have. You got at Utah, at Texas A&M, Georgia, LSU, and Tennessee. Virginia Tech, we just got to beat Wake. We just got to beat Pitt. We just got to beat UVA. We just got to beat Georgia Tech. So, in the SEC, you got to finish top 3. In the ACC, you probably got to win it or come in second place. And it's a lot easier to do it at Virginia Tech than it is at Arkansas and Auburn. I don't even think that's really debatable. So that's kind of where I stand on those jobs and the situations that he would be in if you were to take them. Let me know if you disagree, if you think any of the current openings are more attractive than Virginia Tech. So my belief, what do I believe? What do I hold to be true? Regardless of the outcome, regardless of if he decides to sign on the dotted line or not, I believe Virginia Tech has put themselves in the best position possible to land the best candidate possible. I will be bummed out. Riddle me bummed out if we do not get it done with James Franklin. Will I be mad? No. Based upon the information that I have taken in, I feel like Virginia Tech has done everything that they can up until Wednesday, November 5th at 8:04 p.m. to make this a possibility. If he decides to go elsewhere, if he decides to take more money that's north of $12 million, I'll say, you know what? That probably was too much money, right? That's probably what I'll say. If he decides to do whatever else, I feel confident in the fact that Virginia Tech did everything that they could to land him. And I hope they do. I do believe that this ends with him as our head coach. I truly, truly believe if you look at the board and you look at everything out there, when I say board, I mean the board of coaches, this seems to be the most sensible and accomplishable marriage from both sides for James Franklin and Virginia Tech, coming from Happy Valley, wanting some job security, wanting buy-in from the university, and it just seems like a good marriage. So I do feel like this ends with him being our head coach. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, and we'll dive into other candidates at that point. This is my slogan. This is what I got. Are you ready? It's TV or VT. I think James Franklin ends up coaching at Virginia Tech, or he ends up on College Game Day or Fox's show with Urban Meyer. And I don't think TV is a really bad option. I think waiting a year is definitely a possibility. The thing that I think really throws a wrench in that is if Florida State does come open. If Florida State does come open, I think that that's absolutely something that he would and should consider, is that Florida State job. Now, if it doesn't come open and he goes to TV, Florida State, if I'm a betting man, I'm betting it comes open next year. So we'll see how that plays out. Again, my belief is that James Franklin will be the head coach of Virginia Tech. I truly, in my bones, believe that it'll happen. Will it happen tomorrow? Don't know. Will it happen next week? Don't know. Will it happen after Thanksgiving? Don't know. But that is what I truly believe ends up happening in this situation. Lessons that are somewhat related to this situation. Boards are fun. I'll tell you what, the boards 247 TSL, they all work incredibly hard to do everything they can to bring you as much information as they possibly have their hands on. And this is not taking anything away from them. And also, they boast some great info. There are a lot of times where you would go on there and you will receive information that you wouldn't find normally, and it turns out being true. On the flip side of that, that does not mean that everything that is said on the board is true. It does not mean that every update and every single thing that you see is an undeniable 100% take it to the bank fact. I think a lot of times we take things 100% as the truth. And a really good example of this is sometimes things work out in a way that you wouldn't see on a board, and honestly, nobody would see coming. And a perfect example of that is Sam Cephas getting the defensive coordinator job at Virginia Tech. I mean, we were talking about Poindexter at Penn State. We were talking about guys from Baylor. We were talking about guys from Prize background. We were talking about guys from North Carolina, and then Sam Cephas is our defensive coordinator. I don't like Sam Cephas, but I'm just saying that's something that came completely out of nowhere, right? So just something to keep in mind. If you see it on a board, it doesn't mean it's fact, but it is fun to partake in, and I will continue to do so. The other lesson that I've learned is, can you imagine being your life every single day? I retweeted a video by, I think his name's Chris Carton, the guy who was in jail from ESPN. And his job is to talk about sports for 6 hours or a million hours every single day. And, that's hard. And I give him credit for doing it. But anytime Virginia Tech is launched into the national spotlight for something, and they certainly are in the epicenter of it right now as we're going through this coaching search, you have so many people who don't know diddly poo about Virginia Tech or college sports in general weighing in on the subject matter. It's very much like when they asked Stephen A. Smith to talk about MMA and boxing. Like, what the hell do you know about that? Stephen A. Smith, they're like, you do UFC now. And he's like, great. And then he does it. And that's not taking anything away from Stephen A. Smith. It's just kind of, when you are Colin Cowherd or any of these guys that are talking about sports forever, they do a really awesome job, in my opinion, given the circumstances, talking about the NBA and talking about the NFL. When you start asking Colin Cowherd to talk about SEC football, or you start asking Stephen A. Smith to start talking about MMA, you usually end up with some pretty preposterous quotes. And I can't imagine can you imagine being at an Ohio State or being at an Auburn or being at one of these other schools where you're getting some of these hot take, off the handle things that they have to talk about because it's national news, but they're not familiar with you guys at all, or they don't really focus on you guys that much. It's jarring to me. It's like when First Take talks about college basketball for women. You guys don't watch this. Why are you talking about it? Anyway, has nothing to do with James Franklin. It just has to do with the silliness of talk radio. We're going to wrap this up with some of the questions that you guys submitted. And first of all, I do want to thank everybody from the Virginia Tech community chiming in on this. And it's a crazy time, man. It's an exciting time. And I know everybody, let me start with this. A lot of people are frustrated that we're not getting live updates on this. And again, I'm going to stand on this. It's not Virginia Tech's job to provide you with daily updates on everything that's going on. And it's frustrating for me too, when you're, trying to talk about it and you're getting no information because of the NDAs, and we have an AD that's not talking publicly. But the school doesn't owe really anybody any answers until they have to answer for who they hire. So that's where I stand on that. But I'll answer these questions to the best of my ability. I'm also not indicting anybody that wrote in questions. Thank you for your questions. Hokie95 isn't going to Arkansas/Auburn or whatever mid-SEC team almost equivalent to where he was at PSU. Yes, a bigger paycheck and greater revenues to work with, but it also comes with a harder road to the playoffs and probably a shorter tenure, right? Yes, I agree. I do agree with that. I don't think it's similar to Penn State, because I think Penn State is definitely a tier 2 Big Ten team, especially when they added Oregon and USC is tier 2 now too, just because of how they've been the last couple of years. But I think it's a worse situation to go to an Auburn or an Arkansas. Auburn and Arkansas is going to freak out in the comments here, but it's not a better job than what James Franklin could have at Virginia Tech or what James Franklin had at Penn State. Virginia technically In your opinion, which schools are we actually competing with for Franklin? Of the schools that are open, Arkansas, and that's strictly because they might pay a preposterous amount of money. But I don't see that happening. I don't see Arkansas so farly outbidding Virginia Tech that James Franklin's like, you know what? I know I can win easier at Virginia Tech, but I'll sign up for this Arkansas job. So I don't think that's happening. Now, jobs that are not open, I certainly think that we would be competing with and in a tough spot against Florida State. The other ones already mentioned, LSU and Florida, but I think they're going to go in a different direction. Jason Powers, at what point does VT move on? Every day we don't make an announcement, it seems like we are further away from signing him. If you can land James Franklin, you got to land James Franklin. Straight up. That's where I land on it. Now, does that mean that you don't entertain other candidates and you don't do your due diligence, so we're not standing holding the biggest bag of excrement if he decides to go in a different direction? No. I don't know this is fact, but I believe that's what happened to Virginia Tech, the last coaching hire, when we really wanted – it seems like we really, really wanted Billy Napier, and we didn't get him. And the backup plan was Brent Pry. So that's what happened. Reasonable Squirrel. You think JF would pick VT over Maryland? He's got history there, same footprint to recruit, perhaps our biggest competition for signing him. I don't see Maryland as a competitor here. Virginia Tech is a 10 times better situation than Maryland. Yes, it's in the same recruiting ground. Maryland is not the primary focus of that university is football. It's a basketball school. It's a bottom dweller in the Big Ten. Taking the Maryland job would be what it would be like taking the Vanderbilt job in the SEC in like 2013 is what that would be, which coincidentally James Franklin did. But I think given his status and what his goals are, I don't think that it's realistic to think that. Also, Maryland, isn't their conference rival Penn State? Like, don't they play Penn State last week of the season every single year? I don't think James Franklin's fired up to sign up to play Penn State every single year at a far inferior school. I don't think that would be exciting. So no, I don't think that is competition for us. They also haven't fired their coach. Stelios. He says, does the full Virginia Tech BOV have to approve the new head football coach, or can the rector make the final call on their behalf? The next Board of Visitors meeting is on November 17th to 18th. I don't know what the deal is. If somebody on the committee has the opportunity to sign James Franklin and says no, they should probably be institutionalized. So I don't know what I would do if we were in a position where James Franklin was like, yes, I will come here for X amount of dollars, and then somebody was like, nah, we're good. I don't think that would happen. Adam93 at vt.edu. What are the odds a deal is done, but they're waiting to announce it until the week of the UVA game? Not that it isn't already a distraction to be where we are. Just feels like it would add a lot to the team's plate to get through the next month. 0%. 0% is my answer. I do not. First of all, if a deal is done, that would mean it would have to go through a legal process and people within the school would know about it. And I'm sure Virginia Tech has some chatty Cathys and chatty Collins. And I don't see that as being something that wouldn't be spread as information and get out. I also think Coach Montgomery's done a really good job keeping this unit together and keeping this unit motivated. So, look, there are Virginia Tech players that are liking posts that we post about James Franklin. So it's not like players aren't aware of the possibility that James Franklin would be hired as a coach, right? So I don't think announcing that we have James Franklin as our next coach creates a distraction at all. It would actually remove a question mark, I think, for a lot of them. Last questions from Ed Williams. Hammering the over on 10.5 minutes. Ain't no way this is even close to 5 minutes. You are correct. I just spoke for 34 minutes and 50 seconds. I put out a tweet today. I said, well, I'm going to talk for 5 or 10 minutes about James Franklin. Nope. That's not what happened. I hope this was helpful. Look, from where I'm at, right? All I want to do, I want to hire James Franklin at Virginia Tech. I think it would be tremendous. I think it would be the best thing that's happened in this school in a very long time. I also don't think it's helpful to, if I don't know something is a fact, I'm not going to talk about it as if it's a fact, right? And I also just kind of want to get to the chase, right? Like, I'll present something that might or might not be a fact and kind of talk you through how I feel about it. But ultimately, everything that we discussed on here, the facts are the facts, the guesses are the guesses, and the fiction is the fiction, right? So that's kind of where we are. Hope this was helpful. Hope you enjoyed this. If you're still here, comment in the replies. What is the emoji that we're going to do this time? Put a wrench in there because it's time to go to work. It's time to go to work. So be good, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your week. Beat Providence. Shout out to the women's basketball team for getting it done last night. And hopefully this is over in quick order, but we will see. Be good, everybody.